Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rates and Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. And tonight, kind of a special show, kind of a full circle show, I would say. The very man that's responsible for us even doing this show is going to be our guest tonight. So it's kind of a nostalgic event for myself. But without any further ado, I'm going to welcome in my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
I'm excited for this show, because Kevin is the guy that brought us together.
Absolutely.
So with no further ado, let's welcome Kevin Rutherford.
All right, we're going to welcome Kevin in, and I'm going to, before I let Kevin take over real quick, I'm going to just ask for a little bit of housekeeping from everybody. If you would please do it. It makes a huge difference if you would like, share, and subscribe to the video. It helps us out tremendously, helps us get into a bigger, broader algorithm. And if you find any of the information that we share with you guys tonight helpful or useful in any kind of way, if you know anybody that can benefit from it, by all means, please share the video with them as well. And with that being said, Kevin, welcome back. Welcome back to the show. You're kind of this kind of your brainchild, and we just kind of been running with it ever since. But thank you for taking the time out to come back and join us here on the Rates and Lanes podcast.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I think I'm more excited than you guys are, though. I think it's just incredible what you two have done with this show and that it's still going. And I'm excited to be back here with you. Let me tell you what else, though. This is it's nostalgic for me for another reason. I think it's kind of obvious that I'm not in my studio today.
Yeah, I thought so. Unless your car is your studio,
You and me both. We're both on the road. We're on location.
That's right. I promise I'm not homeless living in my car. Today was one of those days that I might have overscheduled things a little bit. And there was a time when Lisa and I were traveling full time doing the show from the road every day. And there were times where I would be driving down the road. She would have two cell phones in her hand, and I would tell her, as soon as you get a good signal, tell me so I can pull over and we can do the show. And that's kind of what today was like. I thought I was going to be able to make it home, and I kept looking at the clock, and I'm like, what was I thinking? I'm not going to make it. So I was in a dead zone here in the gorge, and I was doing like 85, trying to get to an exit that I knew I had a signal, but I made it with seconds to spare.
Good work. And you know what? That's not. Are you in Oregon right now?
I am. Yeah, I'm in the gorge.
Yeah, they're heartless when it comes to giving tickets, apparently.
Yeah, I was a little careful. I'm at least close enough to home that if I got pulled over, I'd probably know who pulled me over, and I'd be okay.
Okay, that helps.
You know how that goes.
Yeah, if you know the guy, sometimes it helps.
Small town, you get to know the police, so I think I would have been okay, but I got to the exit. I'm parked. I'm not doing 85 anymore, so I think we're.
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, we got a kind of a controversial topic that we wanted to kind of pick your brain on tonight. We wanted to kind of broach the subject of broker transparency. It's kind of a big rage within the industry right now. You got your proponents on both ends, on the ones that are for and the ones that are against. Kind of give us a breakdown or a synopsis of what you think about broker transparency, Kevin.
It's bullshit. How about that?
I agree.
That's one way to put it.
Does that sum up my feelings pretty succinctly?
Yeah, I think so. And
I'll tell you what. It sums it up. But let's unpack it. Let's go into it a little bit more.
Okay. You know what surprises me more than anything? One, that I've kind of somehow become the voice for anti-broker transparency. But bigger than that is that we're even discussing this at all.
I agree.
I'm not only that, but I'm shocked at how many people are on the other side of this. To me, it's anti-business, it's anti-American, it's anti-capitalism. I don't understand. There are almost no other business-to-business transactions that I know of where somebody is required to show their margins. Can anybody even think of another one?
I totally agree 100%. And I think a lot of it stems from the fact that we have people that don't understand business, number one. And number two, they're not old enough to remember when our governments, both the US and Canadian governments, yours at a federal level, ours more at a provincial level, had their nose in everybody's business. Do you really want the government to start honing in on our businesses?
So, Chuck, you have a great perspective on this, and I want to tell you how much fun I had at Matt's and what a surprise it was to see you right before the show and then have you join us. And you told your story. I know I'm supposed to be the guest here, but can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, please.
So I'd like your take on this. Let me explain my understanding of what the regulated industry was all about, why we deregulated it, and then ask you a question that I have probably asked 30 people in the industry, and almost everybody just kind of blows me off. Like, I don't know if they've never thought about it, but I never get a straight answer from anybody.
I'll give you one.
Okay, so here's the way I understand regulated industries in the US. And if we look, it was trucking, airlines, utilities. And if we go back, my understanding was the government looked at these industries and kind of decided it would be hard to build out a trucking industry all across the country if there was too much competition, because it was a big undertaking. Same with utilities. Who's going to put phone lines all across the country and then be put out of business by somebody else doing it? And my understanding was they financially regulated those industries to limit competition. Is that a correct understanding?
Partially, but I think my understanding was it was twofold. My other understanding is, number one, when trucking first started and we got rid of horses and wagons and we started to use internal combustion engines, which would have been sometime in the 20s, I guess, or just before, somebody in Washington figured out very quickly that this industry was incredible because it used manpower, it used wood, it used steel, it used oil, it used all these resources, and it delivered a finished product of service. So, number one, it needed to be protected because of how many industries were going to be dependent upon this industry. Number one, because they were going to use a lot of wood, steel, manpower, and gasoline and rubber.
Yeah.
And twofold, the second thing was to make sure that shipper in California that was making glass boats could ship his or her glass boats from California to New York. And those were the reasons I understand why deregulation happened, and that's why they came up with that class thing. If you remember the old class, it went, I think, from class 50, which was loads of nails, or pallets of nails and screws. That was one of your lowest classes, and I think it went up to class, I think it was 300 or something, which was full seaman. And it was just to so that everybody could move their product.
Yeah, so really it came down to kind of protecting the industry from too much competition because we really did believe it was important. And I agree with that. Now, I don't necessarily agree that it was necessary, but I don't know. I didn't live at the time, so we'll skip that. It happened. But then I also believe that everybody knew at some point that would end, that protectionism would end, and we would turn this industry into a free market just like every other industry. And that happened around 1980. And up until that point, the federal government used the authority process to control competition, right?
100%. But I was around those days, and I can tell you, people did not live as if they ever thought the party was going to end, because just prior to deregulation, a lot of companies were still buying other companies. So, and I need to explain to the listeners. I think I've told you. Rico may not even be aware. So Kevin Rutherford had permits or authority to haul from Seattle, Washington to New York City, but he had no authority to haul from New York back to Seattle.
Right.
Okay. So he would drive his load. Now, produce didn't count because it was an exempt commodity because it came out of the earth. But if the produce came off a ship in Seattle, then it was no longer exempt. And exempt commodities or anything came out of the ground, I believe, and printed matter with a date. Those were exempt commodities. So if when Kevin got to New York City and he unloaded, he would have to get a load of exempt commodity to come back to Seattle, or he would go to, let's say, Rico, who had authority to haul between New York and Seattle, and he would use Rico's authority and trip lease to Rico, and it would be Crescent Carriers. You'd get a placard on your doors and it would say lease to Crescent Carriers for the one trip. And all of a sudden, if you did it for, if you had 5 trucks doing it all the time, you'd finally get fed up and you'd say to Rico, listen, let me buy that authority. And you would call a Washington, D.C. lawyer that hung out at the ICC in down in Washington, and you'd say, listen, I need authority to haul from New York back to Seattle. And he would facilitate the entire process. So the lawyers were acting as brokers, and people traded authorities as if they were baseball cards, but with a huge price tag involved, guys.
Right.
You would pay, like Rico may want, if that was a good lane for him, he may want $1 million for it. And that's what happened. You would go to the bank and you would say, look, I got loads going to Seattle every week. It's my customer. But Rico's authority, and the bank manager would say, well, Kevin, that's a no-brainer. Here's the $1 million. This is, and he gave you the $1 million. And then all of a sudden, 1980, your authority isn't worth enough money to wipe your nose with. I'm not exaggerating.
No, you're right. But
and that's what happens.
In reality, isn't that the way it should be? I mean, why do people really understand how much the government was picking winners and losers? And it's a horrible system. I'm so glad we got rid of it. I have 2 issues here. And one I'm getting to, the question I want to ask you. But here's the other thing. These groups that are pushing for broker transparency, I'm very familiar with them because they follow me around. They've walked into my sessions and tried to disrupt speaking engagements I've had. This has been going on for a year or 2 now.
Right.
Do you know they want to see regulation come back?
They're not old enough to appreciate what we have. That's the problem. They have no idea what it was like living in a regulated system. It was ridiculous.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say they got what they hoped for, because I've heard them say we need to go back to prior to 1980, that the Motor Carrier Act should have never happened and we need to go back. You understand this. If that happened today, they wouldn't be in business anymore, would they?
No, because what would happen is all of your big carriers, number one, your top 5, Schneider, Hunt, Werner, Swift, they're going to grab the authority.
Yeah.
Okay, they'll have the authority. All of our your followers that try to disrupt you, those boys and girls will be putting trucks on with those companies at 93 cents a mile or 43 cents a mile or whatever the going rate is.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't understand that the government had to pick and choose who got to have authority.
Yes.
And that's what we would be back to. And right now, we know there's too much capacity, so they would have to put people out of business on day one.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? Neither your, and no offense to anybody, but neither your federal government nor ours up in Canada can even run the government. Never mind. It's asinine. It really is. You want to keep the government out of your business, not invite them in.
So here's the big question that I've been leading up to. After 1980, why does the process of authority still exist?
Well, it does, and it's really a formality. It's nothing more than a formality to keep everybody in a line of some sort, more for safety. Okay, they
So,
don't care if you're hauling, widgets one way and apples the other way. They couldn't care less, but they do want to make sure, especially now with all the broker fraud or carrier fraud and all the fraudulent activity and problems with safety and everything else. Um, they want to keep they want to keep people in line, and they need to keep people in line because of the fact that we have we have some unsafe trucks on the road, and we have so much fraud out there. So we need to, if anything, they really do need to know who's operating these trucks to make sure you're a bona fide operator of these trucks, that you're not some guy that's running 28 different truck lines and playing all sorts of games.
so I agree with that, and I understand we have industries that are just as dangerous or far more dangerous. The medical, industry kills a lot of people every year. So none of those industries are required to go to the federal government and ask for permission to be in business. There are other ways, and we have an easy one already in place. The first step of the process is you apply for a DOT number, right?
Right.
And then
Exactly.
after that, if you need to have authority, then you have to go get an MC number. Well,
Right. And they're getting rid of that apparently.
nobody needs authority anymore.
Not
It's
really. It's not
like you
worth.
said, it's a formality. They're going to grant it to us. They don't do it to try to control the supply. So why don't we just drop that whole process? And when I apply for a DOT number, I have to go through all the safety stuff.
Yeah. You know what? I can't argue. That makes you should be running for president.
You're the first one that normally I just get the deer in the headlights look and everybody changes the topic.
No, this is the right way. It's as long as people are operating, and it doesn't matter if you're hauling your own product, if you're hauling, you're a private carrier, or you're a farmer, or you're a trucker, you still have the same responsibility on the highway to operate your trucks safely. That's really
Yeah.
all we're talking about. Operate safely, do things within the law. Don't be telling people that you're Crescent carriers when you're not Crescent carriers, and don't tell them
Yeah.
you're Chuck Snow trucking or Kevin Rutherford trucking when you're not.
I,
Okay,
I completely agree. And
just
I'm
be
all for it.
honest.
Let's give an example. Here's another business really easy to get into. If I want to be a landscaper, I go buy a lawnmower and a weed whacker and I knock on somebody's door and say, "Can I mow your lawn for 25 bucks?" And they say, "Sure, go ahead." If we treated it like trucking, if all I did was buy a mower and a weed whacker, I'd have to go to Chuck Snow's landscaping and lease my equipment onto him so I could go cut somebody's lawn. How ignorant would that be?
Back to you know what? That's what the 70s were like. It's
Right.
exactly what it was like.
But it's still like that today. I cannot go just buy a truck and a trailer and go to a shipper and say, "Hey, I want to move your freight." Why not?
Well, as long as, you know what, but the authority is so easy and it's granted.
I, I yeah,
It's
that
really, I got to tell you, in Ontario where I live, it is much easier to get a trucking license than it is a hunting license.
Well, the
no,
other thing too that they're making things a lot more difficult is with this whole with the whole safer with the scores with
right.
trying to and that's a big thing that Hank Seaton that we've been talking about with Hank Seaton, whether or not you can get a satisfactory rating or not, or because they can't even get enough inspections to even adequately rate the carriers that are out there.
Well, how shocking was it when we found out that the FMCSA had only inspected 7%?
I wasn't surprised at all. That didn't surprise me. They don't have there's
They don't
no,
have they don't have the manpower.
they could have, you know what? All they need to do is do it properly. I have a great respect and understanding and comprehension of the safety involved in running trucks. That's all we're talking about, gentlemen, is
Correct.
the
Yeah.
safety aspect, really. And the accountability that you are who you say you are. Okay.
Right.
And so if you say that you are XYZ carrier out of Seattle, Washington, that you are XYZ carrier, that you're not somebody else and you are who you're supposed to be. Because you are, there is some other things. Number one, you are hauling somebody else's product. So we want to make sure that that's going on the right truck and that we can trace it. Okay. Whether you're hauling for a company direct or a broker or another transport company, you got to remember, you get this authority, you back up to an Amazon yard somewhere, you hook up to a trailer number they give you, and you take off. It could be a very expensive load, and if you're never to be seen again because you're a fraudster, they're out money. So there has to be some protection there for everybody, for the public's sake.
Yeah, I get that. All right, let's move on to another issue I have with the whole idea of transparency. Don't we have examples of completely transparent markets when it comes to pricing, like real-time transparency? So I'm thinking of things like eBay, UShip. What happens to the rate when you have total price transparency?
Goes down every
To the
time.
bottom.
Yes.
Doesn't it go to the absolute? In fact, it goes further than the bottom. You can sit all day and watch people on UShip take loads you know they're going to lose money on.
Yes. And I've seen those deals where one of our old customers used to hold a backwards, like a backwards auction on his freight, on freight lanes. And I saw carriers like just committing suicide. And then I got, really, they were committing corporate suicide. And I just did it for fun. I took a lane and I purposely underquoted it just to see what would happen. Okay. And there weren't very many, no, we lost Kevin for a sec, but maybe we just lost audio.
Yeah, I think you might have lost him for a second. Hopefully he pops back in.
Okay, we'll just give him
I wanted to play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay. There's a question here from a gentleman from Charles. Charles, when will capacity balance out? That's a really good question. We had an extra one here recently being broke, and not until we get, this isn't going to, nobody can put a timeline on this one, unfortunately. I'd love to say it's going to happen soon, but not until we get rid of some trucks, and that's what we're talking about. We have to get rid of some of this capacity, unfortunately. So,
yeah, it's not going to balance out till the herd needs to be cold a little bit more. We got a lot more. We got way too many trucks that are out here, and a lot of way too many people that don't really understand how to operate a business. And I was going to kind of play the discussion that you guys were having and that Kevin was talking about. And I want to kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate, because I think that this is some of the things that definitely he helped me have a better understanding of when I started going to his CMCs, understanding actually how to run your business and learning your numbers and being intimately involved with your numbers, which is a critical component about running any business. But the thing about it that I think we have a lot of people out here, and I think you have a lot of, because trucking is such a low barrier of entry for people to get in, so you don't have the most sophisticated people in the trucking industry. So you don't have a lot of people that have a lot of the sophistication, and they simply think from a term of, okay, it would make things so much easier to negotiate if we actually knew what it was that the broker was getting versus what it costs for us to do it. Instead of you just running your business and knowing your numbers and being concerned about making a profit for your business, but we want to, for lack of a better term, we would prefer to see all of the numbers and then try to come up with I guess grab a number out of the sky that kind of makes us feel better about what it is because of course the conception is the brokers don't have anything but an internet and a computer, and they don't really put in any work.
Yeah, one they bought at Radio Shack for $399. We were talking about it last night, and most mid-sized brokerage houses have hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars worth of technology. and that's where the investment is made. I want to just bring up a point to our listeners about something, and I've mentioned it before, but I don't think I've told Kevin. Before I sold out my shares in Traffic, so I got a call on Friday afternoon from an LTL carrier in the U.S. that we had started doing a lot of work with. And I got a call from the CEO who said to me, Chuck, I got to tell you, it's great working with you guys. And I figured something out that I'm better off working with you than I am having my own sales team. He said, but I'm not firing anybody. But here it is. It's 5 o'clock or 5:30 on a Friday night. I call you. You answered the phone. I can't get hold of any of my salespeople. They're golfing with customers supposedly, or they're out, seeing customers at 5:30. He said, I'm not getting rid of my people, but I'm not hiring anymore because I know you're taking 20 or sometimes 30%, but I know it's cheaper than having a vice president of sales, director of sales, sales manager, and salespeople. I got to give them all cars, buy these lunches. I don't even know how many of them are real. This is just so easy. We take the freight we want, we fill our capacity. What we can't handle, we don't take, and everybody goes away happy. And that's what brokerage is all about.
I was on a space the other night with some of these people that fight me on this all the time, and I just try to avoid them anymore. But they were in a space, I was in the space. Listen to this statement and tell me what you think about this statement, because this was them. They were emotional, they were screaming, and they were saying, look, it is the broker's job to find freight for my truck.
Well, that is they're partially right because they're
right. They are, but they're not right. I mean, they're missing a big point here.
The broker's job is to move freight for the customer. That's number
correct.
one.
That was my point. Yes, he has to find a truck to do that. But the way they were saying it, that broker's job is to find freight for my truck. And I tried to tell them, it might just be a mindset or a thought, but you've got this so backwards, and I understand why you're so frustrated if this is the way you think.
I think it is definitely a mindset.
It's pretty simple. The shipper paid the broker to do a job. You didn't pay the broker anything. It's not his job to go get you freight. He works for his customer who paid him. Yes, he's got to go find the truck to do it. But ultimately, if he finds you, he's now your customer. It's your job to serve him, not the other way around.
Right. That's so many carriers don't understand the broker is their customer. It's not their enemy, it's their customer. And this customer has tentacles all over to get them freight, even in these slow markets. They can do that because they've got the connections. Most of these people that you have been hassled by could not go in and see a shipper and negotiate a freight rate. And what happens so these people have one or two trucks. The shippers today have decided, most of them, except the transactionals, and you still have some small transactional shippers out there who search the internet and everywhere else to find the cheapest trucker they can find to move that load. Nobody in their right mind wants those customers because they're totally transactional. Okay.
Right.
And you could be doing work for them for 2 years, and when they find something that's 3 cents cheaper, they won't even give you the courtesy of a phone call saying, Kevin, drop your rate by 3 cents. They don't even do that. They just go with the other guy.
Right.
So that's who other guys are. The big guys and even the medium-sized shippers, they call a broker, they arrange for a meeting, and they start downloading all those shipments onto that broker. Here, I will make the cookies, you ship them. I don't want to make listings. That's all I want to do. You guys look after the trucking. I don't want to hear you don't have a truck available Friday afternoon. Don't never say that to me. And as a broker, I have to tell you, a lot of times you eat freight costs. When you're getting $2,000 from point A to point B, but if you got to pay 5,000, you pay 5,000,
Yeah.
and you lose
So
$3,000. That happens all the time.
yeah, yeah. So now I do want to talk about fraud. It came up earlier, and I
Right.
get it. It's a big problem. We all have to work to figure out a way to solve it, make it better. Let's think about this. Isn't there that statistic that flies around like 90% of the freight is moved by companies with less than 10 trucks or whatever that
You know what? We're getting a lot of interference somewhere. Somebody got a radio on?
It might be. Let me mute myself because it might be my reefer.
Oh, no, it's not a reefer. It sounds like talking or something.
Yeah, but when Rico
Okay.
mutes himself, it goes away.
Okay. All right. So what was the question? I'm sorry, I could not hear that one.
Yeah, so we know that freight fraud is an issue. We got to solve it. It hurts us all. It's bad
Yes.
for us in so many ways. We also always hear this statistic, and I'll get it wrong, but I'll be close. That like 90% of the freight in the U.S. is moved by companies with 10 trucks or less.
100%. Guaranteed. That's true.
Huge part of the market is moved by very, very small carriers. I know
Yep.
you've heard this from me because I've been teaching this to people for a couple decades.
Yeah.
I tell people, look, and I'm sponsored by a big load board, truckstop.com.
Yeah.
They know my take on this. I tell people you should not be depending on that load board for your business. It's a tool, but if you're getting the majority of your freight from there, you're screwing up. What you should do is you should go find 3 to 5 good brokers, build a
Yep.
relationship with them, prove that you bring value to them, and they should be able to provide you with about 95% of your freight, and you pick up the other 5 from the load board when you need it. And even truck stop they're fine with that, because they believe in that model as well. Let's think about this. If all 90%, and I know it's never going to happen, but if all 90% of the small carriers followed that model, would there be much freight fraud?
No. All the freight fraud, as a rule, starts on the spot market.
Right.
That's what freight, and it starts with somebody being desperate. Either you have the broker that's desperate and he's willing to load, one truck Charlie that he's never heard of, or it's the trucker that's desperate because he's stuck or she's stuck in Odessa, Texas, in the heat of the summer, and it's 150 degrees out there, and there's nothing for miles. It's just desperation.
I'll even go one step further because that happens a lot, but I think it's just as much ignorance and not understanding that the load board is not where the best freight is anyway. And when they go to the load board, they're doing something we call chase the rate. They're in Odessa. They want to get home to Cleveland. They put in their search, and we know this because technology tracks everything everybody does. I've worked with Truck Stop on this. The very next click, almost every time, is sort by rate. So I know what they're doing. They're just looking for the best rate in that lane at the moment. And if they do that today, 2 days from now, they do it again. What are the odds they're ever even going to work with 2 brokers at the same, more than once?
That's the recipe for disaster. Rico and I have been talking about this on the show for years. What we tell everybody, for God's sake, you cannot be a 48 state carrier with 1 truck. You can't even do it with 10 trucks. You need 30, 40 trucks to even dream of doing this. So stop doing it, boys and girls, and pick a lane. Okay, go from point A to point B to point A, and then all of a sudden you've got people on both sides that can load your truck, and they go, "Oh, that's Kevin. He's good." Yeah, and what happens is, I just want to reiterate, no great freight, as a rule, ends up on load boards. The only stuff what ends up on the load board is Friday afternoon when Kevin's truck was supposed to show up to load, but Kevin calls me and goes, "Guess what? You know what? I just blew something on my truck. I don't know what's going on." Or the shipper here, and I've heard it all because I've been, I was at it so many years. The tow motor just broke. It's 4:30 on a Friday. We've had it all happen. We've had a garage door come down and an inside dock, and they couldn't get it up. all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
It does happen. It's trucking. And those loads, quite often, last minute loads, those are the good loads that will end up on a board. Okay. But in this market, there's not a lot of good loads ending up on that load board on the spot market.
And in this market, if that does end up on the load board, it will probably be one of those times where the broker gets to take 20 or 25% because he can. Um, and I think he should. And I know that'll piss a bunch of people off, but that's just the way business works. Um, I had a thought I wanted to go to on that. Or
Why
maybe it'll come back.
while you working on the thought, I got
Yeah,
to. So I'm going to pose the devil's advocate question, because a lot of
sure.
people they say, well, when they hear the term broker, there's another industry that deals with brokers as well, and that's the real estate industry.
Oh,
So
I
a
know
lot
where you're going.
of so
So what
so
industry we go?
so the real estate industry.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
So
let me help everybody with that. Here's
okay,
the
and I'm
first.
going to mute myself again.
Okay, here's the first thing we should realize, that is a business to consumer transaction. And if you look across the board in regulation, the government always writes regulations to favor the consumer because they believe that it's an unfair transaction, that it is an amateur dealing with a professional, and they need protection. So real
100.
estate is business to consumer, and the consumer is given a lot of extra protection. Now, I'm not even sure I agree with all that, but I don't care. Do what you want. Business to business transactions, you almost never see that.
You're
So
right.
there,
That's
that
number one. You're right. But the other thing with real estate, and I have a daughter that sells real estate out in Western Canada. And the difference is my daughter, a house sells and there's a 5% commission, which where she works, two agents or two, she can't double dip.
right,
They don't
right,
allow Ontario. You can. So the seller and buyer can be represented by the same party. There, they don't allow it.
okay,
Okay, so there's 5%. So let's just talk, and that's it's Western Canada. A house sells for $1 million. All right, so you sell your house for $1 million, and the real estate transaction fees, the commission is $50,000. The two brokers split it, and then the real estate agent gets a percentage of that. There are expenses. There can be advertising, signs, things like that, but it's still not like with freight brokerage and other types of business to business. It sometimes costs huge amounts of money just to recruit a salesperson, because you've
right.
got to hire that person and either train them or hire a headhunter to get you somebody. That costs money. You don't have that in real estate, and that's
Here's another
another.
one.
It's strictly commission in real estate, except for one company called Redfern or something, Red Tree, and they work on a different model where it's a salary.
Is that,
And actually,
that,
they didn't fare well in Canada, but
that
it's a different business because everything is commission. Load brokerage is not just commission. There's all sorts of people that are required to move that transaction from the time it's received, whether via telephone, usually it's through a portal or email, or sometimes I'm sure there's some that even come through with fax with smaller brokers and smaller shippers. But it still costs, you have a cost to move that transaction from the time it's received until the carrier is paid and the customer, the customer gets his invoice and everything else. All that costs money because nobody's working for free the last time I looked.
yeah, and let's talk about something else. If we want to compare this, we really can't. It's not apples to apples, not even close. The real estate broker, the only risk they really have is they spend money to market a property during the contract time. It doesn't sell, and the seller pulls it and goes and does something else. Their risk was they lost some money advertising it and they never made any money. But
Yeah,
but it's not like in real estate they have to go buy the house at one price and try to resell it at another price to make a profit. But that's what we're
exactly.
doing in trucking.
And the other thing is, you talk about advertising. Well, we're all old enough, maybe Rico's not, but we're all old enough to remember when real estate companies used to have to take pages of ads in a newspaper.
Right.
Now it's all done online. So they're not
Right.
even spending, tens of thousands of dollars a day trying to advertise. They do it online. It doesn't, they have a system and, they create ads.
Yeah. Yeah. This, as soon as I hear somebody start to say, well, real estate, I just stop and say, look, I know everything you're going to say and you're just wrong.
Yeah, because you're comparing apples to bananas.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And this broker transparency. I had dinner with a carrier on Saturday night, one of our listeners, and he was saying, he runs a fleet of about 20 trucks doing LTL from Southern Ontario here out to the West Coast. And Daryl was saying he really doesn't care what the broker's getting. He sees what the brokers are getting because he gets wrong confirmations and all sorts of stuff
Right.
all the time. He doesn't care. He says, as long as I get what I need and what I ask for, who cares? I hope he's making it $10,000 on oil. That means he's going to be more financially solvent to pay my bill.
Isn't that just the bottom line of this whole issue? That if the only thing you should be concerned about is your profit and your margins, and you either accept the load or you don't. I don't understand how somebody accepts a load, and if you accepted it, it must have been an acceptable rate for you, but then somehow later on you're pissed off because you heard somebody made more.
You know what? It happens. You know what? You agreed to do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
I've heard of corner stores being robbed and banks being robbed, but I've never heard of anybody going to a load broker with a gun and saying, give me the load or I'm going to shoot you. It doesn't happen. Not yet, anyways.
Not yet. Yeah.
Now, I felt like it a couple of times through the years, but
I done heard some old stories from back in the day where the guys walked into the truck stop when the brokers had the truck stop, had the officers in the truck stop with a shotgun because he wanted to get paid.
Hey, I used to have one of those offices in a hotel room next to a truck stop.
okay.
Yeah, I had one of those. You rented a hotel room. You had them take out all the furniture. You brought in your desk, and we had stacks of the magnetic signs. So when we trip leased, we would give somebody some signs, and yeah.
You
Now,
must be older than you look, Kevin.
now let's just bring it down to something really practical.
Okay.
So, as far as I'm aware, ever since 1980. There is a provision that we are supposed to be able to see the rate, but it's after the fact, right?
Yes. Truth
It's
in
after the fact.
leasing.
Where it's not going to do us any good.
And if you ask them to see, if you request it, 9 times out of 10, if you request it from the broker, they just going to tell you the pound saying they're not going to sit. It's not really enforced.
Exactly, which is kind of my point. The rule already exists. It's not enforced, so it's kind of worthless. But why is it not enforced? There's a really good reason why it's not enforced.
There's no manpower. They can't even enforce safety. How the hell are they going to
Exactly.
enforce a transaction?
That's my point.
Yeah.
This is not important the way safety is. It's not at all important. And there is no way to enforce it. And asking them to is irresponsible. Here's something I've been spreading these numbers around everywhere because they fascinate me. But if we want to know how bad of shape the U.S. government is in, listen to this. So I want you guys to guess something. If you had to guess how many days ago or what the date was 1 million seconds ago. What do you think the date was 1 million seconds ago?
Whoa. I'm not even going to look at my computer try to figure that one out. I have no idea. I'm not even going to guess because I'm going to be way
Okay.
off.
Rico, you got a guess or you just...
I don't have a clue.
Okay.
We don't want to look
Here's what
stupid.
it is. 1 million seconds ago was 11 days.
Wow.
11 days. Now, here you got to guess again, and I'm going to make you guess at this one. I'll even help you a little bit. What year was it 1 billion seconds ago?
1 billion, 1,000 times. Hold on. Three. It would have been 3 years, correct?
It seems logical. It was 1993.
Wow.
So a million seconds ago is 11 days. A billion seconds ago is
This is
1993.
1,000. Okay. Yeah.
Now I want you to figure out when a trillion seconds ago was.
I'm going to guess around. Hold on, 1,000. Uh, it's got to be in the about 1948. Am I correct?
32,000 BC. So isn't that insane? We think a million is a big number, but it was 11 days ago. We throw a trillion around now like it's no big deal, like the government does. It was 32,000 years ago. That's the difference between a million and a trillion. But here's what makes me crazy. We're asking the government to enforce this. The government racks up, right now, the US government is racking up $1 trillion worth of debt every 100 days.
Oh man, it's mind-boggling. And you know what's funny? I remember as a little boy in the schoolyard with some other guys talking about numbers. We're 8 or 9 years old. You're learning your
Yeah,
numbers, and I remember talking about a million, and then one of the kids said, "A billion is 1,000 million." We all agreed on that, and
right.
then all of a sudden one guy said a trillion, and I remember saying to him, well, where would you use a trillion? Nobody has
Right.
$1 trillion. And he said,
Right.
well, maybe if you're talking about the sand in the Sahara Desert or something, you'd be at a trillion, or the
Yeah.
stars in the universe. And now we're talking about real money being a trillion.
Yeah. Well, not only that, we're also, I mean, I've heard people, we're not even close yet, but I've heard people start to speculate who's going to be the first personal trillionaire. Come on.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe when you start looking, what's Elon worth? Like 3 or 400 billion now?
Right
He's
now,
getting
it's what
he's getting close.
Yeah, I guess it's not out of the question.
happened.
So to kind of go back again and take a stab at this thing, because I guess my position is I'm the devil's advocate today.
Sure.
So here you have, and like we talked about before, you got such a low barrier of entry, people coming in, and of course the low hanging fruit is always the low board. And we talked about before, it's not the broker's responsibility. You are the broker. The broker is actually your customer, and if you service them properly, it can be a really nice relationship. But a lot of people
Yeah.
got into this business with the mentality of, especially during the pandemic, the influx of people that jumped into the industry that really didn't know what the hell they were getting themselves involved in, and we're still suffering from a lot of that in my humble estimation.
Yeah.
But you got a lot of people that just going for the low hanging fruit, and they're saying that, hey, all of my costs are going through the roof. It's much more difficult for me to be able to continue to operate. And I bought these trucks at normal prices at the beginning when I first jumped in. Somebody has to do something. Because nobody's looking out for me. Everything I'm taking, and business is tough, and everybody's not meant to be in business. And this is some of the pushback. I remember when I very first started listening to Kevin, and one of the things that kind of tripped me out when people would call in and they would ask for advice about getting into the business, and the way that Kevin would try to talk so many people out of getting into the business. I was like, man, this man is wild. But then it clicked. I finally understood. I got it. I got what he was trying to say, and I found myself years later kind of in a similar position when people would ask me for advice about getting into the business. Do you really understand what you're getting yourself, what you're signing up for? And I think
Right.
that's the big thing that a lot of people are not seeing, and people still coming to. This is, like you said earlier, this is a business to business transaction. There are no government. There's nobody that's going to be your advocate, because the government looks at it. If you're in business, you're supposed to be sophisticated enough to look out for your own best interests.
Right.
And part of the thing that that I do feel like there should be some balance brought to is the way that and I guess the balance is you got to go out and go get your own contract. You have to go get your own customers, because the way that they're pushing down a lot of the draconian things that they have in a lot of these broker contracts, which we need Hank Seaton to kind of break and demystify all that stuff. But there's no way to even nowadays. You used to, in the old days, you used to mark out line items in a contract that you didn't agree with, and you might have some success getting it pushed through. But now everything is kind of gone to the digital RMIS type contract, and you just have to, everything's done online, and there's no way to omit anything or add anything for that matter. So from a standpoint of understanding and getting a little bit more sophistication, I think education ultimately is going to be the key for the average everyday owner operator to understand and improve his business. We had a couple of questions, and I'm trying to tie all this into to one before we get ready to wrap up out of here. I'm going to show a couple of the questions, but someone put up this question right here. Someone put up current load Toledo, Ohio to Kankakee, Illinois for $950 in the idea when rates won't suck anymore. It won't suck anymore if you go out and get your own customers.
Well, let me even address that, because what's wrong with me going and getting my own customers, but they're brokers?
That's fine, and that's the right.
Because it's building that relationship. Once you get, and that's the biggest thing. Good friend of the show, Dal Rutherford, that comes on. The thing Chuck was just talking about him. A majority of his business, and he has a hell of a business model, but the majority of his business is with brokers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that's who the shippers want to deal with. They don't want to deal with a guy with one truck or even 5 trucks. They want to deal with somebody that is just going to get their product to market with no phone calls, no fuss, no muss. That's what they want.
I'm pretty sure that Daryl's a CMC graduate, isn't he?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, let's go back to something you said earlier, Rico. And I know you're playing devil's advocate, but this was a good point when you said the barriers to entry in trucking are really low. And I hear this a lot. I hear this from this group that wants transparency. They want the authority process back. And I'll ask them, what barriers do you want to see put in place? And nobody ever really has an answer. What barriers are we talking about?
Well, you know what? Let me just answer something here. I just want to throw this out. When I got into this business originally back in '74, and then and that was as an owner operator. So I started a little trucking company 4 years later with one truck and one driver. But I had to have, and it was a Hertz truck, because Hertz used to rent. They used to rent tractors back in those days. And it was a rental trailer. I can't remember whose it was. It was, Hertz or Ryder or Gilflex or one of those companies. So I didn't have any equipment, but I had $20,000 in the bank. Okay. And that was in 1978. I had $20,000 because that's what you needed to float your accounts receivables and for expenses and for fuel and driver wages and everything else. Now, all of a sudden, we've got a bunch of Johnny-come-latelys, and I'm sorry, audience, but a lot of you are new, that got into this without any money, and you got the most expensive money in the world. You hate the brokers? Well, this is where you're losing your money. You're not losing your money on the broker.
Right.
Look at what factoring is costing you.
Oh, don't get me started.
Okay. And I get in arguments with people all the time. It is a monthly fee, okay? And I just want to explain this as quick as I can, as thoroughly. Factoring is there for emergency, okay? It is not a bank, okay? It is not borrowing money against your house or against something, real estate or whatever. You are borrowing money at somewhere between 24 and 60%.
Yes.
In a business that if you are a great operator, okay, in good times, really good times, the phenomenal times, you're making 10% if you're the best operator out there, the best, okay? In normal times, 2 to 5% is very good, okay? How the hell are you going to spend 24% or 48% or 60% borrowing money and expecting to have a profit? Like,
I couldn't agree
guys,
more.
come on. You're open your eyes.
And it's education. They don't think it's 24 to 60%. They think it's 2 to 6
Yeah.
or 2 to
But that's
5.
a month.
And
I know.
I'll
Hey,
tell you something else that blew my mind. During the pandemic, I remember a lot of people used to, and Kevin, I'm not sure. I never asked you this question, but I'm gonna ask you now.
okay.
Back when with the CMC, when you were doing doing those times, and did you ever get a lot of complaints? I know you had payment plans, but did you get a lot of complaints about the price of entry to come to the CMC?
Not really. Price. I mean, it was a factor because towards the end there, it was a pretty expensive ticket, but it was a huge value. I mean, a 5-day program for the price we were charging was actually pretty low.
It's insane.
Um,
Cause
but we didn't really. If anything, if somebody mentioned price, it wasn't really to complain about the price. It may have been more to say, I see that it's worth it. I just can't afford it right now. And I'm not big on borrowing money for things. But when we sat down and said, should we offer a payment plan? And if we
right,
do, we're going to charge interest. That's how things work.
Right.
And are we doing them a service or a disservice?
This
And my thought was a lot of these people are already in business. If they don't learn something soon, they're going to be out of business. So if I have to finance them for a year and they have to pay a couple of $100 more, I can justify it because I'm going to keep them in business if they come to this program.
I asked you that question to say I just think back during the pandemic of all of the overnight gurus that popped up all over social media and were charging absolutely insane prices for courses.
Yeah.
And they were not giving nowhere near the information that they were giving was basically something that you could go down to maybe go down to the local library if they had a book on trucking, you could get the same information that they were charging thousands of dollars for.
You're right.
For these quote unquote online seminars, and it was not even hands on. I mean, at least with the CMC, there was a whole camaraderie of actually being able to sit down and meet your fellow owner operator, and there was a ton of value that you guys packed into that whole time that when people came in. I remember being able to come in and get your truck inspected, learning all the different speakers that were involved and that came out that helped. I mean, it was a ton of value for the time. I mean, it was way ahead of its time. But I just think back during the pandemic and seeing all of the fly-by-night, overnight gurus that popped up, and everybody all of a sudden, and the information that they gave was just so watered down and terrible.
And another big difference with that whole phenomenon that's happened, TikTok is loaded with those kind of things.
Right.
You look at what they're telling people to get them in. Oh, I can show you how to make $1 million with a straight truck in your first year. And what was I doing? People would call, should I come to the CMC? And I'd ask them, well, where are you financially? And I would tell them, no, you shouldn't come because you're not even ready to be in business yet.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. You had those CMCs were so useful to so many people. You did so much great stuff. You still do great stuff. And I just said publicly the other day, I think you probably saved more truckers' lives than seatbelts.
Well, that's quite a statement. Thank you.
Hey, well, I was there. You know what? I saw those guys that were, these guys were 400 pounds, and I saw them a year later, and they were 200 pounds, and there was lots of them. And you know what? A lot of people owe their lives to you, including me. You know what? You got me into keto, and I am totally hooked. And I can't thank you enough for that.
Well, good. You guys do know the CMC is back, right?
No,
I've heard. Yeah, I've heard you. I heard it was coming back.
It's back, and I believe it's a better value than ever. So the last CMC was 5 days. We crammed as much as we could into 5 days, but it was $1,800, and you had to get there, and you had to pay for your hotel, and you had a week off. And so now the new CMC is, we kicked it off at Louisville this year. I did a 2-day live event.
Right.
And now I do every other week, I do a 2-hour webinar for an entire year. And it's $1,000 program. So you get 2 days live, and next year it's going to be 3.5 days live at Louisville, and then a year after that, and you get all of that for $1,000 instead.
That's great value.
Yeah.
So is the CMC, when you do it in Louisville, is it at the same time as the show, like at the show, or do you do it before or after, or what are you doing?
We are an official part of the show itself. We work show management, but we are prior to. So this
Okay.
year we did all day Wednesday and Thursday up until noon, and then
Right.
everybody got to go into the show. Next year, we're talking about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 full days, and then a party on Thursday morning, and then we go into the show.
Well, I'm going to volunteer my services right now. If you need somebody to mentor people, I'm there, man.
We're taking you up on that offer.
Oh, please do, because I had so much fun, and I'm still in touch with some of those people and watching how some of them have gone forth and prospered. It does my heart good. I'm a real believer in giving back, as is Rico. That's why we do this podcast.
Well, as usual, and I'm not rushing you, Kevin, but I want to be respectful of your time, and we pushed right up on and passed through the 1 hour mark. But before we do get ready to wrap up and get out of here, Kevin, of course, I want to give you the floor for a second if you want to tell everybody where they can find you and what's going on with you before we kind of put a bow on this thing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Probably the easiest thing is start at the website, letstruck.com. Click on everything because there's a ton of stuff there, but my schedule's there, our store's there. You could sign up for the CMC there. Something else I'm doing now that I absolutely love. I never thought I was going to enjoy this so much, but both of you will appreciate this. I'm now doing something I call group coaching. So I used to get a lot of requests. People wanted me to help them one-on-one. And I would say, look, if I did that, and don't take this wrong, but if I did that, I'd have to charge $500 an hour. And it's not that I'm that arrogant that my time's worth that, but my schedule's busy, and it's a supply and demand thing. And
Absolutely.
I came up with actually I took a course to try to solve this, and the course was about the way you would structure group coaching. So instead of true one-on-one, I do a group coaching call every week, once a week. And all I have to charge somebody is $75 a month. And they get 4 group coaching calls every month. And you can start and stop anytime you want. And it's so we might have 40 people on the call, but I might only help 1 or 2 that week. But each person that's in the group gets as much one-on-one help as they need, as long as they stay in the program. And then when I solve their problem or help them, they can just drop out. And I am having so much fun with that. I'm actually working with more small fleets than I am owner operators.
Wow, that is great. That is.
I have one quick success story that I just love sharing. So I had a guy call me. He joined the group coaching, then he joined the CMC, and he's kind of new. He hasn't been, following my stuff for a long time. Turns out it's a family company, been
Right.
around for several decades, been through the ups and downs, and had done just fine. He called me this year, and they are in such bad shape. They are almost out of business, and there's 3 or 4 people in the family involved, and the guy I'm talking to is trying to save it, and he's been listening to some of my stuff and trying it. It was working, but he's getting pushback from the family. Here's where they were. They're in a local kind of operation. Drivers are home every night, pays well, 90 to $100,000 a year, and you're home every night, and
Wow.
yet they couldn't get drivers, and they are parking trucks over and over and over. And I said, look, you guys must be doing something really wrong, and we got to figure out what it is. And he said, Kevin, he said, it's probably not what you think. He said, I will give you 3 or 4 other companies bigger than we are. They do the exact same thing, and they're telling us they're having the same problem. It doesn't matter how much you pay. None of us can find drivers. He said, I run ads and I don't even get a single response. So I said, all right, I've got some ideas for you. We're going to work on this. And I can't go through all the stuff we worked on, but I put a pretty unique fuel bonus program into place for him. The other day, we've been working on this for about 3 months. The other day, he said, Kevin, he said, I got to give you an update. He said, I now have 14 drivers on a waiting list until I can get a truck for them.
Wow.
And that we did that with group coaching, and he's paying $75 a month.
Wow.
That's $75 here.
That's what he says too. He is now my best advertising for the program because he tells
Yeah.
everybody.
What a great story.
And the thing about it is, at least when someone, I'm all for mentorship and everything, because God knows that we don't have enough of that out here. But you need someone that is kind of has a proven, tried and true track record that you can kind of support and get behind. And the thing that kind of pisses me off is all of the overnight quote unquote success people that are out here touting, like you say, I can make $1 million with one box truck in a year.
Right. Right. Hey, one more thing I want to go back to, and I know we're over time, but if it's okay, Chuck, you had mentioned this earlier about picking a lane.
Right.
And another example I've been using a lot, and you guys both know Matt Youngblood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Matt shares his numbers, and he allows me to share his numbers as an example. Do you know what he cleared last year?
Not a clue.
One truck, one driver. That's all this is. It's not a team. It's not multiple trucks. It is Matt and his one truck, and he drives it himself. After all expenses, last year he cleared $274,000.
I was gonna say about 220. I was giving it a shot at.
Yeah. Now, come on, and I just had Matt on the show today. We were talking about. No, he was on my CMC with me today. We had a session today. Matt dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. Matt didn't grow up with a business background. He didn't grow up with any money. He started at the bottom with a 9th grade education. But Matt does a lot of things right. He's been to the CMC. He's got that all worked out.
Yeah.
Matt has been running the Minnesota to Florida lane for as long as I can remember, and that's all he does.
All
Minnesota
you do?
to Florida and back.
And LTL or full truckload?
Mostly truckload now. There was a time he used to do a lot more multi-stop kind of stuff. And here's another good lesson. He had some really killer deals on freight, and they go away, like they tend to do sometimes. Somebody underbids you, something, the company changes, whatever.
Going through that right now.
Because he knows that lane so well, he has always recovered. I mean, as soon as he finds out he's losing one account, he goes out and picks up another one that just makes up for it.
Wow. That's
but that's the thing. You build those relationships, and you become known, and you service the hell out of them, and you'll be surprised what kind of success that'll bring you.
Absolutely.
But most people will panic, and they start thinking, oh, I got bills to pay. I gotta go do something. And but if you just stay true to what it may take a little while to kind of prime the pump, so to speak. But once you get it primed, it'll pay off for you.
Well said. I agree.
So true.
Pay off for you. Well, Kevin, I definitely want to thank you for taking the time out for coming on. We kind of like I say, kind of going full circle here. The man that's kind of responsible for the birth of the whole Rates and Lanes podcast. So we definitely appreciate you for kind of helping us get started on this journey. And we thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come on. And we definitely want to try to maybe do this again sooner than later.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. I was just going to say, don't be strangers. Call me up once in a while. I'll be happy.
Well, we're going to. This is fantastic. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this.
Me too.
I always love talking to you. You're a wealth of information. You've got great insight.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. Let's do it again soon.
Look forward to it.
Thanks again, Kevin. Chuck, let the good people know how they can find you.
Yes, if I can help anybody, just send me an email with your phone number, chucksnow280@outlook.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can in same day or next day, and try to help you whatever your issue is, and keep you profitable. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Rico, you can back run a hole for another week.
Hey, real
Absolutely.
quick. How many
Sure.
episodes do you guys have now?
Whoa, hold on, I can figure this out. Hold on.
I've lost count.
We're up to about 400 or so.
That's awesome, man. I
Yeah.
love that.
50. Oh yeah, we're close to 400, I think.
That's very cool. Congratulations.
Well,
Thank you.
And we thank you for making it all possible. You're the guy that invented this.
Yeah,
Well, let's just keep doing it because this is a lot of fun.
absolutely, absolutely.
It was great. Look forward to spending some time with you out in the West Coast.
Absolutely. All
So,
right.
Passport in order.
There you go.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and join us, whether you listen to us live or you're watching this as a recording. We always are grateful for you taking the time out to do so. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little time to hang out with us. And with that being said, if you find any of this information being helpful or useful, please share this with a friend, tell a friend to tell a friend about the show. Like, share, and subscribe to the video. And with that being said, we want you guys to continue to stay safe out there, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise, and we'll talk at you same time, same place next week, God willing. God bless you and good night.
Catch you on the flip flop. Take care. God bless.
Take care.
Thanks again, Kevin. Give Lisa all my best.
Will do.